One of the fascinating things to me is that we ask doctors about what to do for health and longevity. Now, if doctors knew what they were talking about, that would make sense. But I'm a scorecard kind of guy, and so I'm looking at doctors and saying, really, do they really know what they're talking about? When my tape, Dead Doctors Don't Lie, which came out in 1994, I had a statistic in there from a small survey. It said doctors live to be 57.6, and I rounded up to 58 to give them the benefit of the doubt, and doctors just went ballistic. Well, Wallach, you got to be lying. We don't live to be 58. We live to be 75 like everybody else. Well, even if they live to be 75 like everybody else, that wouldn't be too good a recommendation, because if they're the holders of all knowledge and health and they follow their own recommendations, they should live to be 85 or 95 or 100 or something. Well, they didn't want to believe me, so they did their own study, and they came out 5 years later in 1999 with the answer to their study, and they found out that doctors in America live to be 56. So I missed it by 2 years. So why do we ask people how to live a long, healthful life who only live to be 56 on the average? That's because they have convinced us that health care is very, not only important, but also very detailed. It's very complicated, and you have to go to school for 14 years to know how to deal with health care. And they've convinced Americans that this is true. I mean, you can't pick up a newspaper or watch TV or listen to the radio without health care and Medicare and Medicaid and all this stuff being on the front, right? Well, let's look at some more scorecards and see if we're getting the bang for our buck. Right now, the entire world each year spends $2.7 trillion for health care, 2.7 trillion with a T. Out of that $2.7 trillion each year that the world spends for health care, the U.S. alone, the U.S. spends $1.6 trillion, more than half. And yet, in April of 1990, we ranked 17th in longevity. There were 16 other countries whose peoples live longer than we did. We didn't even rank in the top 10. You have to ask, well, who is number one, and what did they do different from us? Well, the Japanese were number one. They lived to be 79.1, 4.1 years longer than we did. And the interesting thing was, the Japanese are heavy smokers. 68% of the Japanese smoke 3 to 5 packs of cigarettes a day. They are heavy smokers. They are the smokingest nation on earth. And yet they have 85% less cancer and cardiovascular disease than we do. Japanese consume 12 to 15 grams of salt every day, an entire salt shaker per person. We're supposed to consume approximately 1 gram, 1,000 milligrams a day of salt, and yet they have 85% less cardiovascular disease than we do. We dropped 2 atomic bombs on the Japanese to end World War II. They've had more radiation per person than any other culture on Earth. Nobody cleaned it up. They've been wallowing in all the radiation in the soil and water and environment ever since we dropped the bombs on them. Nobody cleaned it up. And they have 85% less cancer than we do. And so I want to know what they know. In all this adversity, they're still living longer than us and are healthier than us. You say, well, maybe that was a bad study. It should be redone. Well, they did 10 years later, June of 2000. They reran the same study, and the Japanese maintained number one. But they dropped from 79.1 down to 74.5. So this was our chance to catch up and surpass them with all this money we're spending. But instead, we dropped from 17th in longevity all the way down to 24th because we went from 75 to 70. There's now 23 other countries whose peoples live longer than we do. Now, you don't have to be a genius to figure out we're not getting the bang for the buck. You don't have to be a genius to say, well, maybe the medications we're getting aren't doing any good. Maybe the advice we're getting is not the best. No matter what the doctors tell us, we're going the wrong direction, so you can't deny these facts, okay? You can't deny the facts.